Okay, I guess I can start now. I will show you some work that I did mostly when I was at the University of Connecticut, but I developed a little bit after I went to, is it good? No microphone? Okay. So, for Michael, who cannot hear well my voice, I will just keep going. So I will be talking to you about instability. And this is an important thing. So the talk will be a little more theoretical, I think. It matches a lot what you saw already on Wednesday by Mohammed. So I'll try to use his as an introduction, and then I'll just build up on the theory. Okay? Instability means phase transition when we're talking about paradigms where we're looking at things such as affordance boundaries. Critical numbers for things such as grasping with one hand, transitions into grasping with two hands, as you scale the dimension of some object. In more common sense kind of use, in the general vision neurosciences, instability simply means things that are unstable. Usually it's not very well defined dynamically, formally. And I'm going to link these two things for you. So the question that I ask is, does the Necker cube perception, so this is the Necker cube, right? I don't need to explain. It keeps switching when you stare at it. So this is symbolized by these different colors. So does the Necker cube perception, which is very unstable, it just spontaneously goes one way and the other way, does it share some organizational principles with the sort of stuff that we care about here? Okay? And I'll show you why we think it might have something to do. I'll run you through a few studies that have been done in the past that give us clues. How do we usually study affordance boundaries? For example, you are asked to perform the action, which is transfer this piece of object from here to there. And when you scale the dimension, people transition from 1 to 2, handed grasping. And in a trial where you scale this continuously, you scale the control parameter alpha, which is the body scaled version of the dimension. You get the typically nonlinear phenomenon, hysteresis. So the transition, as you increase the control parameter, happens later than when you decrease it. Okay? On the other hand, if people are asked to just say what they think they can do, you get this a little more complicated thing, whereas in many cases you get the opposite pattern. The transition happens earlier in ascending and earlier in descending, which has been called negative hysteresis. So we have some interesting phenomena here. The problem is that the patterns where the places where we find negative hysteresis and positive is not totally consistent. So first objective, this study is to really find a paradigm where this is very reliably observed. What does positive and negative hysteresis entail in terms of the topology of the dynamical system? Let's just superimpose the stability domains this is the typical case. Increasing and decreasing, you find the boundaries. Stability domains are here for stable, unstable. When you superimpose them, you find the monostable and the bistable when both modes, so 1, 2, these are the two modes, are stable. And which one you're going to be in depends on your history, where you came from. On the other hand, if you do the same exercise for the other case, where you see negative hysteresis, you get this paradox. Because the transition happened earlier in the growth of the control parameter, when you superimpose them, you find that just based on this single parameter, the control parameter alpha, both A and B are both stable and unstable. So the conclusion is that you need some extra additional parameter to account for this topology. We call it H, and now we're going to ask what destabilizes perception. So the important thing is not, I think, so much that it's negative hysteresis, but this is early transition. This is premature instability. So what destabilizes perception in these cases? What does H correspond to? Heft has been talking about analytical attitude. So the conditions under which these studies tend to find negative hysteresis seem to suggest this has something to do with this analytical attitude where you don't really engage with the action. We're going to map H onto this diagram from Warren, which I hope you're familiar with. It's a very theoretical diagram of behavioral dynamics. Usually what we do is we manipulate alpha, but here we have to put H somewhere in this diagram. Where do we put it? Well, this and what I already told you, they just verbally report the possibility. Suggests that maybe it has something to do with just cutting the action. So H is somewhere here. But it's still, for me, it's difficult to understand exactly what this means. So I'm just going to extrapolate. I'm going to say, let's not make judgments about affordances. Let's just make judgments about things that don't mean anything. So I'm going to define this functional distance. I'm going to have these sorts of paradigms, but not about affordances on the one side, but things such as figures in Gestalt configurations. So this is how I take this intuition to its limit. Okay, I will show you a paradigm where the judgment could be about affordance or something that involves action, or it could be something that just doesn't really require you to do anything, doesn't inform any kind of action. So what is that? I decided with some piloting and searching, I found a paradigm that could do the job. Look at, this is an augmented version of Wertheimer's apparent motion in the beta mode. Here what you see is, I hope, each dot moves very nicely. There's no confusion. This is the way movies work, animated motion pictures work. This is called also optimal movement. And what's interesting about this is that I could either ask you, do you see beta? Or I could ask you to track, can you please track this particular dot? So it's there. Oh, and it moved. So I showed you how I could get a paradigm where this is more about, a little more like perception and action. You have a tracking game, you have conditions of performance, criteria of performance. At the end of the trial, I can see if you've successfully tracked the dot. This is beta. The alternative, so you need to have two modes to have switching, right? The alternative is phi. This is when the same configuration is running, but it's just at a much higher frequency. And what's happening here instead, you cannot find a dot, white dot that moves. Instead, a shadow on top of the dot is circulating, which implies that if I ask you to track this one, it doesn't go anywhere. So your report, but I started later.
I'm still tracking with my watch.
Okay. Is this 5 minutes to the 15 or 5 minutes to the 20?
5 minutes to the 15.
Okay. So this is the middle case. So the point is that as I scale the update frequency of the screen, I can get you from beta to phi, and somewhere in the middle you can see both. Or you could use both of these phenomena to track the dot, to play a simple game. Okay, the game is to track the dot, and at the end of a 5-second trial, to click the dot with the mouse. So in the experiment, you have the one condition where you have to just classify. You just say, I saw beta, I saw phi. You do this by clicking the words on the screen at the end of the 5-second trial. In the tracking condition, where you actually embed it, I tell you at the beginning there's a target bead, then there's rotation, and at the end I tell you click. And based on where they clicked, I can infer which phenomena they were attuned to in order to do the tracking. So I do the same sort of decision, but here they just report without doing anything, whereas here they're playing a game. And we expect, so I did this in 2 experiments. All I changed in the 2 experiments is how fast I ran through the frame update sequence. So I predict in the classifying to find negative hysteresis, in the tracking to find positive hysteresis, and that's what we find. So what you should be looking at is the difference between these bars. This is positive hysteresis, this is not much. Oh, there's no hysteresis really, but in the second experiment you have a very nice pattern, positive and negative for classifying. Okay? This maps nicely to, this is Theo Frank, my advisor, the way he devises the dynamics, the topology of the dynamics. So, this is first, it's an experimental evidence in favor of the argument that I was suggesting, is that breaking this animal-environment mutuality induces an instability, premature instability, which resembles the sort of instability that we see in the Gestalt kind of visual displays that are usually used in the visual science. Okay, so this is a connection by way of breaking the animal-environment mutuality. But we want to do the same thing, and like I said, this is consistent with the other studies, but here it seems to be more consistent. And the reason why it's more consistent, because this is really just a stupid display. It's not asking them to judge affordances, it's just dots in this case. So we will put this into a model. I wasn't actually here, so I don't know how much Muhammad explained the model, but I'll run you very quickly. This is what Haken calls a winner-takes-all dynamics. It's the 2 modes stand for the 2 perceptual modes. Here you just have a fixed point for each of them and competition. Based on initial conditions, you go into the one or into the other. Nothing interesting. You can have hysteresis based on manipulating. So this is how the control parameter goes into action, by changing the stabilities. To get negative hysteresis, like I said, you need another parameter. You need to have parameter dynamics. You review another deeper layer where these are, let's call them intrinsic stabilities, decay. This is just a function that tells you that it decays to some particular value, which itself is decreased by this H. So this is where the H comes into play. Basically, the H engages this big loop. When this one is active, it engages the more decay, which drops down the stability, which in its turn goes back and kills. So I call this winner loses it all. So basically here, in this part, the winner, the mode that is dominant, takes over, but with the additional dynamics, it gets punished. If it's dominant, it gets punished, and this punishment goes up all the way and it dies. So that's how you get this biasing of the active modes when you get this parameter to transition earlier. So what's also good about this is that we can fit parameters, and for the same experiments, we see H is 0 for the tracking. So there's this doesn't basically exist, doesn't come into play. Whereas for the classifying, we have positive H, which basically means here, for the classifying is where you have this decaying, Theo also calls it negative auto-regulation. I just call it decay. So the dominant mode decays if it doesn't do anything useful. For G, which is how much the 2 modes compete with each other, you should read it like this. If you're above 1, you have competition among the modes. And this is also in line with how we interpret these experiments. For the tracking, the gray bars, there's reason to expect competition because these are these are actual actions, you cannot perform both of them. So there's actual constraints on performance. Whereas for the classifying, it doesn't matter so much. I could say whatever I want. So this too is a nice thing because we have a theoretical model that really makes sense with how we think of the tasks. Okay, and at this point, again, is this the 15 or the 20? So there's much more work that unfortunately I won't be able to show all of you, but very quickly, just as a lesson. We've been using so far this, it's a logic gate. This is what enables the decay. But I didn't like this because basically this is not a purely dynamic. It's dynamical plus some logic. I replaced it with